Welcome to everybody in the auditorium. We have a packed house here and everybody at home, or if you're watching this recording later. We are going to talk about the electronics use policy and how it will be changing for next year. I want to be very clear that we're still in process on some of the things, so you might see a slight difference by the time we're in the full implementation in the fall. But I didn't want to end the year without people knowing what's coming. This might change devices that you're interested in purchasing for the next school year, or just kind of your family planning for the year. Welcome, come on in. This will be very conversational because I was kidding, it's not really a full house, so feel free to jump in. If you ask me a question, I'm going to repeat it, so live stream people at home or people watching the recording will be able to hear the question. So we do have a new education law. It's 2803. This comes from Governor Hochul, and she is looking for a bell-to-bell ban on internet-based devices, internet-accessible devices. So there's some confusion, particularly at the high school level. When I first heard it, bell-to-bell for me means first period. Bell-to-bell, according to Governor Hochul and her team, would mean the entirety of the school day, which for us would be 8:05 to 3:05. This means that students will not be able to use their devices at any point during the school day on school grounds, and that is a very big shift. If you have a student who's a rising freshman, it's less of a shift because this is really what they're doing at the middle school currently. So if you do have a child who went to Weber, you're looking at the experience at Weber, that students are using their district-issued Chromebooks and they do not have access to their mobile devices or any other personal electronics throughout the day. This will include wearables like a smartwatch, if you have an Apple Watch, a Samsung Watch, any of those. Smart glasses, which I really haven't seen catch on here, but in the event that they catch on over the summer, it would include that as well. We tried to leave it open that it was more general technology because in the next 2 months there could be an amazing new wonderful Apple device that comes out that we haven't thought of yet. The reason the governor wanted to put this in place is because she's really looking to reduce those classroom distractions, and that is something we have heard from our teachers. It's something that I've observed when I am sitting and doing teacher observations. I like to sit in the back and I can actually see every student's screen. Sometimes I see chess. They are amazing, to be honest, just as I am, when someone walks by to toggle between windows. They're really, really quick at that. That's a skill we've certainly developed. And the communication, so being able to text other people during class or access social media sites, they don't need our internet to do it, so it's not about our firewall. Most of our students are using just their cell phone plan to access that, or even their own hotspot or VPN, so they're able to get outside of our firewall on their own devices. We're really also trying to support mental health and be aware that social media does have an impact on our students. One of the reasons the governor is looking for that entire school day ban is that it will take away some of the FOMO, some of the fear of missing out. So if no one's posting on social media, if no one is able to access their devices, then students don't feel like, well, if I'm not checking my phone all the time, I'm going to miss 150 messages on Snap or in our group text. So it really just takes that pressure down for everyone. There is another aspect. Officer Tony unfortunately couldn't be here today, but the element of being able to pay attention and being safe during emergencies. I've heard both sides of this. So that would include, being able to follow directions and hear what's happening around you and having that general situational awareness, as opposed to feeling like you're trying to send live updates, or if you have your notifications enabled and we are in a worst case scenario where we are in a lockdown, it alerts people that there's a group in the classroom. So all of these really contribute to why the governor put this into place. Okay, so what's changing? So starting in September, it's September 3rd because that's our first day of school, students will not be allowed to use those personal devices. Now, notice that I'm saying use. I am fully aware that a student who works, goes to school, is traveling, and by traveling I mean walking from Weber to Schreiber, is going to want to have their mobile device. We fully understand that. What we're talking about is what happens starting at 8:05. So if we have a student who gets off the bus at 7:15 to 8:05, we're not having conversations about devices. 8:05 hits, that's when the conversation starts. So I want to be very clear with our kids as well. And same thing at 3:05 when the school day ends. If you're on your phone at 3:15, we're not having conversations about that. It is strictly in the 8:05 to 3:05 timeline. And I sort of went over this. We're using the same definition of internet-enabled devices that the governor has given us from the state. We are trying to follow what she's given us with fidelity while not trying to over-implement additional restrictions. So we're trying to find the balance between the two. One conversation we've had about any device that connects to the internet, and one that makes me very sad, I am a Kindle user. Kindles connect to the internet, so this would include all of those devices. I haven't seen too many kids with Kindles at school. Usually they'll have a physical book while they're here, but this would include that device as well. And notice that we're looking at school grounds. That will be an important conversation in just a minute. So, devices that the governor is saying are allowed. Basic non-internet phones. I've had some people ask me if that includes, what if you have your iPhone and just turn the internet off? Because it's internet enabled, it's not able to be used. If we're talking about one of the, I know you guys will know what I'm talking about, the old flip phones that, remember when it was, what, $7 a minute to use your phone? If we go back to one of those phones, that's totally fine. And I've had people say, but you can still text on that. Texting wasn't her overall concern. It was the ability to connect to the internet and social media and some of those other sites, not a total shutdown of all communication. I might buy stock in basic phones at some point over the summer because I do think that we'll have more people who are purchasing those. District issued Chromebooks, we will still need some technology for instruction in classrooms. So we had technology speak with our rising freshmen and say, this is a great time to make sure if you have a cracked screen, any broken devices, you need a new charger, this is a great time to make sure everything's in working condition because you will need to start using those devices. When we did computer-based testing for AP exams, we had a test to make sure that, number one, our Wi-Fi could handle the number of students in one space, connect to the internet to have that exam. We also wanted to make sure that the Blue Book apps were updated on students' Chromebooks. We had students who were sitting there for 20 to 30 minutes because it was the first time that entire school year they had ever turned on their Chromebook. And they had 8 months worth of updates to install. So this would be a great time to make sure that everything is working, especially for kids who have not been using their Chromebooks. Approved educational devices, so that would be something that might be IEP related or some other translation devices for our English language learners. That would be really through special exceptions or accommodations that are legally required. Prohibited devices, you'll keep seeing me put these up here so we're all on the same page. The phones are the big one. It's really the smartphones that the governor is talking about, but if you are a Mac user like I am, you can do every single thing on a Mac that you can do on your phone. So that's why it's also the personal tablets like with an iPad or any other tablet, or the personal laptops like a MacBook or any other device. And again, we have the exceptions at the bottom. We're trying to make it really clear so that there's consistency in the classroom. We don't want to put teachers in a position where one teacher says, yes, you can use that device, and it's because you've been begging me so many times and I don't want to be mean. It's if you are asking to use a device that is not your district issued Chromebook, it is going through the building principal, which would be me, or one of my designees, which would be one of the assistant principals, to be really consistent. We don't want one class to get special permission or one grade level to get something and not the others. We have to be consistent because of the reporting as well at the end of the year. So we'll have to report not the name of the students who violate the electronics use policy, but the demographics. So the state will be looking to make sure that there's not a disparity in the demographics of students who receive some sort of consequence. And if there is a disparity, we'll have to remediate our plan to ensure that it's being equitably enforced. So it is specifically being collected by the state, and we'll have to make sure that we are complying in a way that is fair to all of our students. And you see there are other exceptions for the special educational purpose, so that would be the accommodations. Certainly an emergency, if I had someone come to me and say, Dr. Bear, I really need to call this doctor's office and the phone number is on my phone. Yeah, come to your assistant principal's office, come to the main office, and we'll be able to do something to help the student. That will really be the next point of, if you need help, if you need to do something, you need to make a call. Even now, when we have students who need to do an interview that might be via Zoom or Google Meet or something, and they come and talk to us, we can find a nice quiet space for them to be able to have those sorts of meetings. We can still work all of that out. That first point of contact is going to be their grade level assistant principal. Medical needs, that was something I had kind of briefly mentioned in prior meetings. If someone, for example, uses a medical alert that would be available on their phone, they could still have the phone on their person. It just wouldn't give leeway to be on Snapchat. So we're still looking that even if you had your phone or other device on you, it's not opening the floodgates of what you're doing on that device. Okay, so this is where we've been going back and forth as far as what the best course of action is. We've worked really nicely with the PWTA to talk about what are you seeing in the classes and what's the best way to implement this policy. Full disclosure, we do not have enough lockers for every single child enrolled in the school to have their own locker. We talked about what would it mean for some students to share lockers, now saying that you need to have a very expensive device, potentially very expensive device that is stored at least one, some people bring more than one device, in a locker with someone else having access. That was not something we were comfortable with. So we have enough lockers for students in grades 9 through 11. Just like at Weber, the expectation is that the device is stored in the locker. That way, if you are in an English class, for example, and you are a 9th grader reaching into your backpack, texting or doing something in your bag, the conversation is you're not even supposed to have that in the classroom. And then I'll talk about what we're looking at as far as some potential consequences following that. So 9 through 11, they would be not in the student's possession. Just like at Weber, the expectation would be in the backpack. We do have some lockers, so if we have a senior, regardless of this, if we have a senior who requests to have a locker, likes to store things in there, maybe has some equipment to bring to school, we can still give those out on an as-needed basis. We would have enough, just not enough for the entire 400 student grade level. So seniors, because of that, would be able to have the phone in their possession, but the expectation is that we still have it off. So we don't want to hear phones going off all day. The same way that when kids have phones in class now, the sound shouldn't, or classes are over. This past year, they shouldn't have been making sound or causing a disruption. So that will continue. And if a student is using a device they're not supposed to, then we'll go through with those consequences. But it shouldn't disrupt the learning environment if they have the phone, whether it's in their pocket, in their backpack, in their handbag, wherever they have the device stored. One of the things that I have really been grappling with, even building administration, we use the kids' cell phone numbers to find them. If you have a couple periods off back to back, call your cell phone and say, hey, it's Dr. Bear. Can you stop down in the office when you have a chance? That's a very typical thing that we're doing. So we've been talking about how we can really keep that communication. It's funny when I speak with even my parents who were like, you didn't have phones when you were in school. You just called the school and they got you when they got you. I said, but that's not where we are anymore. The expectation is you're used to reaching your child pretty instantly. And I see some nods here. So I'm sure if they're not answering you on the phone that you're paying for, you're like, What are you doing? Answer me. So I think we're just in a different space than when I was in high school, than when you guys were in high school as well. So starting next year, when we roll out Infinite Campus, our new student information system, we can have the kids actually tap in with their ID that will let us know they're in the school building. So say you have first period off. We wouldn't know if you had arrived or not, and if we can't call your cell phone trying to just find you in the building, we can at least start with, all right, we know that Katie Bear tapped into the front door. The students are already used to, even if they don't love it, showing their ID when they walk in the building. Now it's just the next step of, here's the station, you're just going to tap in. It will record that you've arrived at school. We'll do the same thing when students leave. It's also a really great way for an emergency to account for who has physically been in this building. That gives us a really great sense of that. So that's our starting point. It will be inconvenient for us to find your child immediately if they're not in class, but we'll check the usual areas. We've done a much better job in the last few years of making sure that if a student has an off period, that they are in the cafeteria, in the library, in the commons, and those would be the places that we start. If a student is working with a teacher for extra help, then it might just take us a little bit longer to get a hold of your child should you call when they're not in class. If they're in class, we'll figure out whether it's an emergency. So if you call in, you say, we have a family emergency, I need to pick up Katie Bear right now, then that's something we're calling your child out of class. If it's a, can you get a message to my child because so-and-so is picking them up later today, and make sure they look out for them at 3:15 in the front circle, that's a message we can get to them and just call the class and say, have so-and-so stop down at the end of class, and it doesn't need to interrupt the learning process at that point. The other things that we've really been talking about, cell phones are so convenient that we can say, oh, practice is canceled later today. Just text home and say practice was canceled, the game was canceled. So there's an increased level of communication that we need to have as a school building, and those are conversations that we've been having regularly, that we need to get better at that really fast. So we will be starting the next school year. We do a cabinet meeting right before the school year starts and emphasizing what are the messages that need to go home. Parent Square is going to be our form of communication. It's the official communication from the school district. This is a great time to make sure that you have Parent Square access. The app is really nice if you don't have it yet. There's also some direct messaging. So I know that even when I had to get a non-urgent message to a parent that needed to be timely but was not an emergency. It wasn't a pick up my cell phone and call on a field trip, but I wanted to send out a message. I just did it through the direct message to the parents. They got it. They messaged me right back. Easy. When it comes to some of those other things like practices and games, I know Sports U is really that platform, so I'd make sure that you're using that platform and have readily available access to it. We have an option in Parent Square. If you're not aware of it, you can either get a digest, which means you get it all at the end of the day, or you can have it and instantly notify you. So generally, if I'm sending out something non-urgent, I'll send it out maybe 9, 10 in the morning. If you have it on digest, you'll just get it later that night. So it's entirely up to you. I have a feeling that if you have more than one child, you might want digest, so you're not getting messages all day long, especially if they're in different buildings, but however you prefer to receive that notification. Yes, that's what we just talked about. And same thing with your child, if they need to contact home for any reason, it's the same thing. I think the tougher part now is that no one knows any phone numbers. But if you're heading to your assistant principal's office and you need to say, I need to get a phone number out of my phone, hopefully they know your phone numbers. I think that would be a good place to start. It's like when you started kindergarten, they were like, do you remember your phone number? Do you remember your address? And you had it on a little tag. I feel like we're back there. I'm sure you definitely know your home phone number from when you were a kid, but do you know any phone numbers now? Okay, this is something that we've also been working on, subject to some change. We want to be totally transparent and open with what's happening. We were back and forth on the first offense as to whether it would be a warning or going to an assistant principal's office. We are following what they do at Weber, that the students, anyone who went to Weber, had the same thing. If you have a phone, you're not supposed to have a phone, and it could be any device. I am focused on phones. Then you go to your assistant principal's office. That device stays with your assistant principal for the rest of the day. The student can pick that phone up at the end of the day. The second offense, and it says referral, not like a written referral, you're just sent to your assistant principal's office. The second offense, you're going to your assistant principal, that device is staying for the rest of the day, and at this point, your parent will be notified, because the third time that this happens, the parent will be asked to pick up the device. I believe at the middle school, is it the second time? So this even gives one additional opportunity. If Dr. Lomangino were here, she would know. And I have the picked up between 8 and 4 p.m. because if you show up at 9 p.m., we just won't have somebody in the office. So from 8 to 4, we'll have somebody available to get the device back. The fourth time, going to the AP's office, the parent is picking up the device, and now for the next 5 school days, that device needs to be dropped off with the AP for the duration of the school day, and then the student can pick it up at the end of the school day. And now we're looking at 1 detention after school. The fifth offense, at this point, we're like, okay, 5 times, you know you can't have this device. We've gone over it. You're going to the AP. The parent is picking up the device. You're checking in and out the device from your AP's office for the duration of 1 cycle, which is 6 days. And now we're taking time, free time away from you to go to the ALC. So the ALC is the Alternative Learning Center, where you wouldn't be missing class. That is something the governor was very specific, that we cannot suspend a student for a violation of this policy because they would be missing instructional time. So none of this would refer to losing instructional time. However, if we do have someone who is upset about having a device taken away and refuses to give the device, now we're talking about the code of conduct and insubordination. So that would be starting to be a different violation of the code of conduct. I hope we don't get there, but I'm sure that at the beginning of this, we'll have some people who are not happy about giving, and I keep saying phones, I think that'll be the biggest point of contention, but really any device. So we go up to 5 here. After that, we'll be continuing what this bottom part is here, and at some point we'll be having a parent meeting talking about what we can do to better support our students in making decisions. The challenging part is whether or not we agree with each component of what Governor Hochul is saying. Unfortunately, it's the law, and we do need to follow what is happening as far as the directive from the state. So we're trying to find the best way to navigate within that. So I did do a thought exchange to get some opinions. The prompt is up at the top. So what ideas, concerns, or suggestions do you have to help us implement this new policy in a way that supports all students and encourages a strong partnership between home and school? So we had 133 participants who submitted 68 thoughts. You didn't have to submit a thought. Some people just did some ratings, and I had AI just give us a quick summary. So the concerns were really on restricting device use in schools. A lot of that was related to please make sure they can have their access to their devices when they're off campus for our juniors and our seniors. And the change that our seniors, Dr. Weinstein's class, who have just had their phones for 3 years, have a pretty big change. So I do understand that this is a challenge. I've had requests for students to have access to their phones during free periods, during lunch, during passing. Unfortunately, I'm not able to grant that because the governor did say that bell to bell. However, we're not collecting devices from students. It was very important to me, if you've heard me speak about this at all, that our students who are going off campus have access to their device. Because if they need help, if something happens, I want them to be able to get it. I do not want them to text and drive. I want them to make good choices. But if they're even just walking down to Main Street, we've had students who have called the school and said, I'm going to be late coming back. I was with my friend so-and-so, they were sick, I'm waiting for their mom to arrive, and then I'm coming back to school. That's great. Thank you for not leaving your friend. Thank you for letting us know that you're okay. Come back and check in with us when you're done, and then, we can call the other family and make sure everything's okay. So we're not collecting devices. I would highly encourage students who are going off campus to bring their device, whether they're driving or walking. I have heard some security concerns, like what if we have an emergency at the school? How will we get in touch with our children? I hear that loud and clear. This is where it would be great for Officer Tony to talk about, what does it mean to have access to your device during an emergency? The research really does support that it's better for the situational awareness than I'm on my phone, I'm texting whomever, I'm posting, spreading, not that students intentionally spread rumors, but the spread of misinformation when you're talking about your posse come in, we'll be talking about what is our emergency communication, and certainly with Shannon Boulin, our PR person as well. How can we make sure that we're updating families, because that what seems like minutes and doesn't seem like a big deal feels like a big deal when you are thinking about your child, and I'm fully aware of that. Some of the others were about enforcement. How can we make sure that it's consistent? So these were the top 5 messages that were, when people ranked them, you can see on the right-hand side. So 11th and 12th graders should be permitted to utilize their phones when leaving school grounds for off periods. I agree. That is not changing. We still have open campus for our juniors and seniors. No change. Safety off school grounds. You can see this was pretty important to the people who responded. Agreed, they have their phones when they leave school grounds. During the day, upperclassmen can still go off campus. Don't worry, they still can, 11th and 12th graders. And you can tell that was from a student. It's really special when they earn that privilege of going off campus when they're juniors. They appreciate it so much. It's nice. And the 4th one, I hope you're not planning to take phones from kids. It will be hard to get them back at the end of each day and worry about kids stealing them. I agree. We are not collecting phones. We are not taking phones. The only time that's different is if someone is violating the electronics use policy and the phone is stored in the assistant principal's office. We have already had conversations about getting those smaller safes for each one of those offices, because if you are storing a device there, or even if a parent needs to come and pick it up, what happens with that device that's just laying around, and how do we know whose it is? So we've already talked about what does it mean when you collect that device, how will it be stored? How do we make sure it belongs to the correct person, get it back to them? And having a safe in each office will allow us to make sure that if it goes there, that we're not worried about theft. That was really important, because these devices are not cheap. The last one, allow high school students at least in 11th and 12th grade to have their phones off campus when needed. Check. So you can see what was really most important to students and families, and I think the general theme here is we want to make sure our kids are safe. No one is fighting for, they need social media during the school day. Those aren't the responses that we're getting. Okay, so prohibited electronic behaviors. This isn't new, whether you're on campus, off campus, this has been in our code of conduct. You can't cyberbully, harass, hack into a system, violate the privacy use agreement, or impersonate someone else. Whether you're on your school-owned device, a personal device at home, you can't do these things. So this is pretty consistent. If you read the language, it's going on for a second read at the July reorg meeting. Is it July 8th? July 8th. So if you are interested in hearing that conversation, you can definitely log in. You're welcome to come to the board meeting, but they also live stream them. That's all the same. Prohibited content. This is all the same. You can't access inappropriate sites, gambling sites, anything of that nature. This is all consistent, and that would be on school grounds. If you are at home using your own personal device, unless you're logged into your Portnet, we wouldn't see that type of activity. So this one in particular, we're talking about on school grounds, you shouldn't be doing that. Even if you're outside and we see that there's an inappropriate site that you're accessing from outside the network, You can't do that on school grounds. So the middle one is more geared towards school-owned devices and being on school grounds. The implementation timeline, September 3rd is the first day of school. That's why it's the 3rd and not the 1st. They just won't be here. And we will have the full detailed version in our student handbook that will be updated prior to the start of school. And in my opening of the school year emails that I send out, I keep trying to say letters, we'll have the full electronics use that will include the finalized version. So you are seeing preliminary that might be subject to change. Really important if you're thinking about spending thousands of dollars on a new device for your child to use at school during the school day, this might change how some people make those purchases. So it was important for me to let you guys know before the school year started. And that's really the gist. So what questions can I answer? Sure.
As a teacher, I know that I set the tone for my classroom. And so when I'm in my classroom, I make sure not to use my phone because I expect my students not to use theirs. Will this apply to teachers and administration as well? Or
I'm just going to repeat that for at home. So the question was, really setting a tone from the adults in the building, whether you're talking about teachers, and I'll say paraprofessionals, administrators, if we are saying students aren't able to use these other devices, will we be modeling that same behavior? I have also spoken with the PWTA about this. So the biggest challenge I actually see is the multi-factor verification. So if you have that in any of your accounts, even for me to log into Synergy, I need my phone to do the multi-factor verification in order to get into my Synergy account on the computer. So those are bigger conversations. I think even if we're talking about students can understand that, yes, you have it out for multi-factor verification and then it's not out again. We will be trying to model this as much as we can. There are some times that I'll say as the principal, I do have my phone when someone else is trying to reach me. However, I think we need to really lean into other modes of communication. So we do have the walkie-talkies that it'll turn into reach out to me on channel 3 and trying to model that for our kids, because I could imagine being a teenager not happy about this, seeing Dr. Bear walking down the hallway on my phone. So we've been talking to teachers about it as well, and what are ways that we can do this in the classroom to make sure that we model what we need to. I think that's an excellent point. We've definitely talked about that.
So first of all, I don't envy you guys. This is going to be really tricky, and our hands are tied. You've touched on most of my questions, but so that day when there was a fire here, for example, just want to bring that up. We want administration focused on the problem and not communicating with us. And we were able to get firsthand from our kids, we're fine. I'm out of the building. I know updates. So, maybe if there's somebody more on point to communicate out to the parents quicker, who's not the one triaging the situation, is probably going to be more important.
I agree. Can I say that in here, and then you can go to your next point? So it was when we had an incident in February and we had to evacuate the building. Everybody went back into the gymnasium. The communication from the district was slower than certainly what you would get from a student with a phone in their hand. So that's one of the conversations we had even before I knew that bell to bell was going to be 8:05 to 3:05. It was to tell you how tremendously busy it was for administration. I'm so glad that you acknowledged that. But how do we make sure that we're communicating effectively? So we already talked with the safety team where we could have one person who would be on the outside, who is very strong and clear at communicating, who would be able to work directly with central office and would be able to send messages out to our teachers as well, who could do that in a timely fashion while I, as the person running the command center, am doing other things and making other decisions. So it was having an additional person come in and join the team whose only job is communication. the only job. And this brings up a really good point that should something happen where we have to send out a message, sometimes the first message might be shorter with, we have a situation happening, focus on the students, everyone has evacuated, more updates. So you might get more frequent, shorter notifications, even if that initially is like, wait, what do you mean something, what something? It will be the information that we're able to provide, because when situations unfold in that way, the information has to be vetted in order to send something out in writing, because anything can be posted, anything can be forwarded. So my primary concern, always, I'm an instructional leader, learning is important. Nothing is more important than the safety of the people in this building. So my first communication to you will be, your children are safe. We can figure everything else out from there. So I hope that answers your question. This is.
Address the question, it's just a matter of the fact that like we're able to get,
Absolutely.
you know, reassurance from our kids quicker than we get from the school, but, so that's gonna go away.
You're right.
To her point, I think it's important that the teachers have their phones on and everything, like during the day, and that. But, so my son's very involved in like the court fight games and all of that, like media stuff, and they post during the day, and there's a lot of benefit to them having their phones. With Mr. Clapp and all that stuff. Like, how are you feeling? Is that what you want?
That's a good question. So I spoke with Mr. Claff. I don't even know what day of the week this is. Friday? Oh, thank you. So the question was for Port Vikings and for our broadcasting classes, the students are really using their phones to record, to do some of the work before they even go to editing. And that's where they're getting a tremendous amount of content. Even if you walk down the hallway, you see the kids interviewing somebody and they have a little external microphone. They do really great. So Mr. Claff, who is in charge of the broadcasting classes in Port Vikings and does that really great work, came to see me, I think Thursday or Friday? Oh, it could have been Thursday because we weren't in school. Friday last week saying, wait a minute, what does this mean for broadcasting? Do we need additional equipment? And my answer was yes. So he is looking at some other devices. The convenience of a phone, there's a few different things, especially if you have an iPhone, you can easily share it with the Macs that they have in the Mac lab. So there is such a convenience at that level. And then the other is the kids always have their phones on them. It's easy if they're doing something in between other classes, they're not going to sign out equipment. So that was something that we talked through. We're looking at some ways that there would either be removable storage or something that they could easily do the equivalent of sharing the file, because the more you share it and how much you compress it changes the quality. He is doing that research. We're going to get the equipment that we need. The other things that we've had in consideration would be when a student quick needs a calculator, like a 4-function scientific calculator, they pull their phones out. We won't be able to do that. So especially the science classes are the ones where this kind of comes up, making sure that we have 4-function calculators. The other one was stopwatches. So there might be times when they are doing a lab and they just pull out their phone and use a stopwatch. So these are things that we need to get. I did a survey of my teachers, April, March, saying, what are the considerations that we haven't talked about yet? When do you have your kids using phones in your classroom for instructional purposes? Things that came up would be QR codes are so easy. We won't be able to use QR codes. However, we can still post in Google Classroom and the kids still have their district issued Chromebooks. So it's an inconvenient shift in some ways. It's a really challenging shift in other ways. I think the first 2 weeks of school will be particularly challenging, and then we'll settle in because ultimately the kids have been doing this at Weber. Weber makes it work. There are other high schools, even in the state of New York, that have implemented a phone ban for years at this point. I've listened to panels of people speak. They talk about the beginning being the most challenging, and then they really do settle in.
So one more question. So, you have seniors, there's always seniors, and there's a lot in I imagine, the first quarter with college applications, essays, and all that stuff. They're not able to do any of that now.
Well,
They'll be
Their school, because the school gets shut down.
School email addresses for any of that college stuff. So
Is they wouldn't get it from outside.
you need to have some computers that you're able to use Gmail or different, I don't know how you, like that. I think that's important because they're gonna have
Yeah.
a lot of periods off and doing that versus the library.
That's a great point, but let me just say it for the people at home. So that's okay. I just don't want to forget what you said. So the concern was, especially for our rising seniors who are filling out college applications, they might be doing some of this work during off periods, and the limitations on email accessibility on a Chromebook because they can't use their district email address to receive or send in those applications would present a challenge. So we have a new director of guidance who's starting July 1st. This will be one of the things I bring up with him. Having, some devices in the library, which they're desktops in full view, we might be able to navigate something like that. That's a great suggestion. Or even having some options in the guidance suite where they are near their counselor. The other place that we could potentially do something, and I'll have to speak with Ms. Mills, is the Writing Center. We have a lot of students who actually go to the Writing Center for help with their college essays. So that would be another place that they would need to be able to access if they're submitting or doing something else. I will say that the one benefit of every district in the state of New York doing this is that our kids will not be at a disadvantage relative to other students. So some of the things I've heard are, if they're trying to get an internship and they can't call people during the day, but neither can the high schools next to us. So I do think that is helpful, although our 11th and 12th graders will be able to go off campus. So if, someone had enough free periods that they were going home, they would still have an option, but I'd love to have an option here. I'll speak with Mr. Arini. He's the new director of guidance. I think that's a great suggestion. We'll make sure we have an option.
My next one, and maybe related to this, have you thought about putting like payphones, like for kids who need to make a phone call or anything?
So the question was about payphones. There actually used to be a payphone right in the lobby here. There's plywood over it. So it's funny you say that because I had thought of the payphone issue. We are going to start out by, if you need to make a phone call, just pop down to your grade level assistant principal. If we feel like there's a greater need than that, I don't know that payphones exist for us to be able to buy them, but we could look at other options for students to be able to make phone calls because there are times that it happens. I can remember one time when I was in high school and I had to call my mom, and I just walked up to my health teacher and I was like, I'm really sorry, I have to call my mom right now because she was checking in on a doctor's appointment, and I was like so freaked out about it. And she goes, just use the phone on the wall, just step into the hallway. And I was like, what? Like, it didn't occur to me that I could be a regular person and just use a phone. I was freaking out as a high school kid at having to call my mom. So we'll have to kind of navigate around that. If it seems like it's more than what an AP's office can really handle, I think we'll know that within, the first couple of weeks. And we'll speak with Brian Graham in technology about, are there stations that we can have around the school that if a student, or in the lobby, that if students need to make some phone calls, could be for a ride home. It could be for any number of reasons that they have an option. But they should definitely go to their AP's office first. We'll definitely work it out and make sure the kid's okay. Even when we have students who are waiting outside, my first question is, are you okay? Do you need a ride? Granted, most kids have a phone, but you'd be amazed at how many times their phone's dead. They aren't able to, get a hold of somebody, and we'll still bring them in one of the offices and help them make a call. So we will definitely work that out.
You touched a little bit on this, but for kids who are on like sports teams, sometimes their coaches will communicate about like games and practices or anything changed during the day for like sports games and stuff like that. So how is that gonna?
That's a great question. So this one was about communication regarding changes for practices, games, any sort of athletic event has gone through Sports U. So I believe that they are accessible on the Chromebook. I did ask Mr. Stratweiser to kind of look into that to make sure his coaches can communicate with students. Worst case scenario, if we have to make some Google Classrooms for them so that they can access it, we definitely know they can on their Chromebooks, then we can always shift to that in addition to, but I know Sports U has been great as far as communications with the parents, so I wouldn't want to take that away. So that's a great question, and actually where my mind goes first when I talk about communication from the district, because practices are 5-6 days a week. If you include games and that whole spin of it and the weather changing, it could change things pretty quickly. And I think we've gotten very used to, it's easy to quick send out a text to your group. So making sure we have Sports U, making sure we have Parent Square, and if for some reason Sports U isn't working for the kids during the day, either getting it whitelisted if we can, that means access to it, like not blocked by the firewall, and creating a Google Classroom if we can't, because that will send out push notifications that the kids could get on their Chromebooks.
What about for the research program where they have to have a statistical software on the MacBooks and they can't get that on the Chromebook? How are we going to handle that?
So the question was about statistical software like SPSS as far as running on a Chromebook. That was one of the conversations I even had with, when I first said this to the faculty, I saw a hand go up and I said, I know this is about research. I knew that question was coming. So I've been speaking with Dr. Feeney about this. Depending on the program, SPSS I don't think would run on a Chromebook, but these are tests that we'll have to do over the summer. So making sure that they at least have access to it on a desktop device in the room where they have the instruction taking place. And we'll have to do this on a case-by-case basis. The fear is that, if we just say blanket research can use what, not everybody is using programs that aren't available. And if we have something that can go on a desktop, that will be our first choice. I've used SPSS at length. I understand the importance of having a data set and having it readily available. This is one place that we need to dig in a little bit more. Any other questions? Sure.
So the 12th graders just won't get lockers at all? Is that the plan?
So 11th and 12th graders now don't get a locker automatically assigned to them. It's by request. So if a student wants a locker, they can just go to their AP and say, I'd like one. We will still have enough lockers that if the 7 seniors, 8 senior, how many seniors do you think will request a locker? I was right. I made up 7, but I was actually right. So the seniors who want lockers will still absolutely be able to get them. I think in my 3 years here, I have seen a total of maybe 18 or 19 kids cumulatively ever at a locker. So we are talking about a pretty big shift that they're not used to using lockers. It's a fairly large building. So I compare it to parking in Manhattan. If you're going all over the place, it's hard to keep going back to your car if you drive in, as opposed to you just carry your things with you. So maybe that changes if students are bringing their Chromebooks. Maybe they start using their locker, but the expectation from us will be that their personal electronics devices are in their locker. And any senior who wants a locker will get one. Any?
They sometimes be looking for their sports stuff, but they just need it at the end of the day, shut down.
It depends on the sport, because some of the bags that come in, the comment was some of the kids use their locker for sports equipment. So it depends on the sport. When you see some of the goalies come in with those giant bags, that's not fitting in any of the lockers. But some of them, especially if they are on track and they have like a change of clothes, some different sneakers, that absolutely fits in their locker, and we'll certainly be able to accommodate them. And they get sports lockers too. So sometimes they just put it down there. Not all the time though. I've seen some kids use their other lockers for sports lockers.
So if a kid, a non-senior, leaves their phone in their bag and they don't access it, what happens? I mean, there's no penalty, like, right? I mean, they're not like making sure people are putting their phones in their locker.
We'll be right back for the people at home. Yeah, so students are expected to keep their phones in their lockers, and we will anticipate that this is being followed. If their device is out and not in their locker, we know it's not in their locker. Any other questions? Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for people at home or people who watch this later. If you have any questions, you can reach out to your grade level assistant principal, or you could certainly reach out to me. Thank you.